Hello.
Hello everyone! Sugar and Spice is back with another set of stories after a short gap. Hope
Yes.
you all are doing fine. Yes, and this is a
Yes.
lovely month of February, the month of love. Yes, Rita?
So, the month of love, and we've come up with two stories which again tell you about different shades of love. How different? It's for you to figure out when we start with the narration. So, once again, welcome to Sugar and Spice, and Deepthi is going to start with the very first story for today.
So, my story for the day is called The Cactus and it is written by O. Henry, the famous short story writer. So, here goes. The story, the protagonist is called Trisdale. He's a young man and his friend and he are having, they're sharing a drink at a bachelor apartment and they have just finished a wedding party. They have just come back from a wedding party and Trisdale clearly remembers the scene that he had just witnessed. The beautiful bride was walking towards the aisle, in her lovely gown, and she was looking so beautiful. And when he saw the way she was looking at her, the man she was getting married to, he remembered so many things. All the events of the past just came rushing back to him. That is when he got lost in his thoughts. The bride of the day had been his lover once. Both of them had been so deeply in love just a few months back. And he just couldn't figure out what had caused both of them to drift apart. Why had he lost her? Thinking about all these things, his mind took him back to those days when the lovely courtship was going on. Everything was so flowery and happy, and they had been the perfect couple. Whenever he looked at her, it was so unmistakable the love that she had for him. One day she had casually asked him that, one friend of yours had told me that you speak very good Spanish, you're an expert in Spanish. And his pride wouldn't let him say no, though that was the reality. And he had smiled at himself, thinking of, that incident. After this, he had proposed to her formally, and the shyness and the expression with which she had looked at him, he very well knew the answer was going to be a yes, but she had not put it in words. Instead, she had said that she would give him her answer the next day. He waited impatiently for the answer, but instead of the reply from her, he had received a plant, a red earthen pot with a cactus plant in it, which the girl's maid had, you know, brought brought in to him. And when he looked at it, he couldn't make out anything. He couldn't understand what she meant, and this plant had no message, nothing attached to it. Only the botanical name of the plant was, so it was some strange name which he didn't bother to look up. He did not understand what it meant. He just placed it there and he was still waiting for her answer. It did not come. The answer never came. And as he was so sure of her yes, it had, this incident had really hit him hard and he couldn't take it. His ego and pride couldn't take it. And the next time when they met, he acted very indifferent. Whereas the expression on her face was still the same. She was shy and coy and she was looking at him with so much of love. But when she saw him, acting in this strange manner, she also, slowly just went away from him. They both, for no reason, they broke up. Suddenly, his friend calls him, and his friend's voice, wakes him up from his thoughts. And he's like, Trisdale, why are you looking so sad? The bride and the groom of the day are the ones who should be sad, right? They have lost their freedom, they have got married. We are still bachelors, we can be,
Happy.
relaxed.
Carefree.
Yeah. So he just smiles and he says, yeah, I was just thinking about I was just thinking something. And then that is when his friend notices the same cactus which was kept on the table there, and he asks, is that a gift? Yes, yeah, it is a gift from a friend. Oh, okay. It is a very rare variety of cactus. I've seen so much of it. I know this variety very well. I said, oh, really? Okay, what is special about, do you know anything about it? So he said, oh, yes, it is a very special kind of a cactus, and the name is Vento Marmi, which is, do you speak any Spanish, Trisdale? He says, no, I don't. He says, oh, it means come and take me. At this, Trisdale is completely taken aback, and now he has got his answer. But his bride is already gone. His girl is gone, married to another man, and he cursed his ego and his pride for not having told her. Now he realizes the importance of the question she had asked him on that day, right? So this is how at this place where the friend translates the botanical name of the plant to Trisdale, the story ends. That's how it always does in O. Henry stories,
Yes,
right? Where you're like left in shock.
It's a pity he couldn't have Googled, at that point of time.
Exactly.
Found out what
We would have done that right away, right? It was these days.
So at the end of the story, you realize that this protagonist is going to spend the rest of his life kicking himself for having lost someone whom he loved so deeply.
True.
Yes.
For no reason, just
Because
that
love makes you
momentary.
do silly things as well, isn't it? You're so emotional at that point of time that sometimes you don't think straight.
So true, so true.
Yeah.
And then in end of the day, you call it destiny or fate. It was not meant to be,
Maybe it was never meant to be. You never know. At least that's the way you comfort yourself. And
Exactly.
I think that is sour grapes.
That is more. Yeah, very true. That is most of it. It's mostly to comfort.
Yeah,
you blame it on destiny.
But it's so typical
O. Henry.
of O. Henry, where you have, the end is so different.
Yes.
It leaves you spinning, I mean, was this what it was all about?
Yes.
That's a lovely story.
So, the next story is by Shrija, and it's also another lovely story. So, let us listen to that.
Yeah, and one of my favorite authors, as I always say, Roald Dahl, because he also has very interesting stories, and this one is again something I read again and again because it's such an interesting story, and I'm sure a lot of you would be familiar with the story when I start. It's called Mrs. Bixby and the Colonel's Coat. Okay, Mrs. Bixby and the Colonel's Coat. A little difficult. Bixby is a little difficult on the tongue, but I hope I can get it smoothly through the rest of the story. Okay, so it begins with with the narrator telling us that there were a lot of men in New York who were fooled by women to get into marriage, and then they spend their lives working their backs off, trying hard to maintain these wives. And when they reach a stage where the woman wasn't happy, she would ask for a divorce, and then they spend the rest of their lives paying off their wives. And so there were many husbands like these who were very, very frustrated and who were divorcees, or men who had been fooled by women and maybe cheated upon by women. And these men, when they reach middle age, all they can do is feel sorry for themselves. So they get together at these little pubs and over a whiskey or two discuss, these stories where the women are the ones who are villains, and they fool their husbands until one fine day one hero comes along and puts this woman down, and she is she loses everything she has. And the men, when they listen to these stories, they sit together and laugh, even though it is fantasy, because they feel sorry for themselves. They had very sad lives themselves. So this is how the story begins. But the narrator goes on to say that among all these stories that were discussed by these people, there was one story that was a little superior to the rest. Why? Because it was actually true, it had happened. And the story goes like this. So there was this dentist, a small, puny looking man, but very capable, a Mr. Bixby, and his wife, who the author describes as a large woman with a wet mouth, okay, to show that she was the one with a huge sexual appetite, and this husband of hers wasn't able to satisfy that. So she had this very cozy arrangement where every once in a month she would visit her aunt Maud in New York. And no, not in New York, I forget the name, I'll get back to that. And she would take a train, visit her aunt, stay overnight, who she was very fond of this aunt, and she'd come back the next day in time to get her husband's supper ready. So it was a very comfortable arrangement, and the husband was very happy with it, and so was she. But the thing is, now it's where these stories that the narrator talked about, where you have the husband, the wife, and the dirty dog, the third person. So here in this real story, the third person happened to be a colonel. And this colonel was the one who Mrs. Bixby visited once a month. So it was a very cozy arrangement because they met each other just once a month, which means, just 12 times. And this went on for 7 to 8 years. And because they met just once in a month, they never tired of each other. So every meeting was with even more, more renewed passion. And it was a lovely time that they had together. Nobody suspected. And, that's what we presume in the story. And she would come back the next day, happy, satiated, back to the boring life with the dentist husband. So this was the arrangement that happened for 8 years or so. Now, the story begins at this part where she had just finished her tryst with her lover, and she was waiting to go back home at the station, very happy with herself. This had been an exceptionally good meeting, so she was very happy with herself. And while she was waiting there, she was interrupted, her thoughts were interrupted by the colonel's man in waiting, and he said, "Ma'am, this is for you. I was asked to give this to you." And he hands over a flat cardboard box to her, and she's very excited because it's just before Christmas. And she said, "Oh my God, after this lovely evening and night we spent together, he's given me a gift before Christmas, lovely." And she says, "Does he expect a message?" he asks the man. The man very brusquely tells her, "No, there's no message," and he leaves. So she wonders what it could be. Then looking at the box, she wonders, I'm sure it must be something expensive. And she decides to put her hand in and check it out without seeing what it is. Sometimes people do this when you want to know what the gift is, and the excitement, the anticipation of seeing what the gift is. So she put her hand into the box, and she could feel the tissue paper rustling, and then her hand fell on something absolutely soft, so soft that her fingers sunk down into touch the cardboard box. And she of course could feel a letter of some kind placed on top of this material, but she had a feeling what it could be, and she couldn't hold back her excitement until she got into the train. Then she went into the ladies' room, and there, after sniffing, without opening her eyes, she closed her eyes, opened the lid of the box, once again felt the texture of the stuff inside, and finally she opened her eyes, and she couldn't believe her eyes. She shook it out. She took it out and looked at it, and it was the most beautiful mink coat that she had ever seen. It fell like silk and satin to the ground. It was a long one, and it was black with just a hint of a cobalt blue in it, and it was so beautiful. She put it on, she tried it on, and looked at herself in the mirror. She had changed completely. Something about her. She looked sexy, she looked like a queen, and she knew that if she wore this coat and she walked in anywhere, there would be people scurrying around attending on her because she looked so good. There was something about that coat, so much of power. And she looked at it, she was so happy she couldn't have, and fitted her like a second skin. So she looked at the letter that accompanied it, and when she took it out, she saw that the colonel had written that, "I remember you told me that you like mink coats, so this is a gift from me to you, but it's a parting gift. I have my personal reasons, but we can't meet again. So this is a goodbye gift." So it struck her at first, it was a bit of a shock. Oh, I'm not going to see him again. But then the practical side of Mrs. Bixby kicked in. She said, not bad. I had a good 7 to 8 years, and this is a lovely gift. I mean, this is something. And she tries to, estimate the cost of it. It must be at least $6,000. I'm sure it's very, very expensive. You knew it. And she thought about wearing it and draping herself in. And she was lost in these dreams when she checked. There was a little note behind the paper on which, this farewell note had been written, and it said, just tell your husband that it's a gift from your Aunt Maud. Now that struck home, and the big smile that had been playing across Mrs. Bixby's face, kind of froze. How the hell would Aunt Maud afford something like this? What am I going to tell my husband? I can't waltz in there. He may not think about other things. I may have fooled him all along, but this is not going to fool him. He'd want to know where I got such an expensive gift. How could the Colonel do this to me? She didn't want to part with it, but she didn't know how to take it home, and she was going to reach, the train was going to get home maybe in another few hours, and a cab would take her home. She was almost home, you could say. She had to think fast, so she told herself, don't panic. You've been a very clever girl. You've managed something for 7 years without your husband knowing, having an inkling of it. So you've managed this. It's a coat. You can keep it, but think of what you're going to do. So 2 hours later, Miss Bixby got off at the station. She hailed a cab and told the cab driver, take me, do you know where we can find a pawn shop? The driver looked at her curiously and said, yeah, you could go to this particular street where, you have a lot of pawn shops. I'll take you there. Okay, she said. And she took him, the driver took her there, the cabbie took her there, stopped outside a shop. And she said, wait for me, I'll be back in just a few minutes. And taking the box with the coat, she went in, and she called, asked if someone was at the shop. So the proprietor of the place came over, and she said, look, silly me, I lost my pocketbook, and I need to have some money, not much, it's about $50 until Monday, because the banks will open only then, and I can't get any money out before that. So I don't have any jewelry on me, and she shows her fingers. I don't have my ring with me or my bracelet. So I'd like to pawn this coat, and I'll collect it on Monday. So he says, okay. And she said, you'll keep it safely, right? Because, and he looks at the coat. At first he, wasn't really giving her complete attention. But then when he saw the coat that she pulled out, the mink coat from the box, he came over and he held it and he said, this looks new. She said, yes, it's new. But then I told you I don't have anything else on me. So I want you to, I'll pawn this. I'll take $50 and I'll come back and collect it. So he says, okay. And he starts writing down, can you give me your name, your address? She said, do you really need your name and address? I mean, I don't think I want to do that. I'll just come and take it on Monday. So he said, but he says, I'll give you a ticket which was, where he had half of it and the other half was given to her. There's a number on this, but remember that if you lose this ticket, then anyone who gets the ticket, the second half, can claim the coat from me. So then you can't, which is why I take down the address and your name. She says, no, not required. I trust you. Just keep it safe for me. And then she has a doubt. You'll give me this coat back. You'll give it back to me when I come, won't you? So he says, you want to take the coat or you want to pawn it or not? You decide and tell me. I can write down your name and address. If not, you'll have to depend on this ticket that I give you. So she collected the ticket. She said, okay, fine. And she took the $50 and she went. She went home. And she saw her husband dropped a kiss on his head and said, did you miss me? So he looks at his watch and says, you're late today. He said, yes, I was a little late. I got a little held up. And she says, can I have a drink? I have a headache. So he goes and gets the usual drink ready, and she watches him from the back, wondering what is the right time to broach the subject is. So she watches him as he measures it out, and she can't help but compare him to the colonel she had just left behind. The colonel was a huge fellow. Her husband was a very puny, fellow, and she had nothing but negative qualities to find about him. And she wondered, how could he lead such a boring life? All the time he spends his time with root canals and teeth and stuff like this, and when life is so much more interesting. So she has these thoughts running through her mind along with the tension that she's going through regarding the ticket. And her husband comes back and gives her the drink. And then she slowly looks through her purse and says, oh, I forgot to tell you, I found this on the seat of my cab, the one that I came in, and she hands him, "What is this, dear? Is this a ticket to some, is it a ticket to some show? I don't know. It looked interesting, so I got it along." So her husband took it from her and says, "No, no, no, you don't know what this is?" And she says, "No, I don't." So he explains for almost an hour what it was, that it was a pawn ticket, and that it meant, the $50 on it meant that this could have been pawned for something expensive, because so she says, "But it says only $50, her best act. Miss Bixby is a very good actress." So she says, "But it says just $50. He says, "Yeah, but usually they pay just 1/10 of the value of whatever, is pawned. So this could be an expensive thing. It's very amusing," he says, and smiles. She said, "That sounds interesting, but now it's mine, so I would like to take it. Can I keep whatever this pawn ticket, has? I don't know what it is, but could I keep it?" He says, "Of course you can." And he says, "But what if it's a man's, something a man has pawned? It could be a watch or something else." So Mrs. Bixby tells him very magnanimously, "Then you can keep it, dear. If it's for you, of course I'll give it to you. But if it's a woman's, something that belongs to a woman, it has to come to me, okay? Finders keepers." So he says, "Yeah, no problem." And he says, "Very amusing. I'll go pick it up on Monday." She says, "No, no, no, no. I'll pick it up. I found a ticket." So he says, "No, I don't think you should. I'll do it. I'll pick it up before my, going to work." She says, "But I found it, dear. I'd like to find it. It's interesting. I'd like to take it." So he smiles at her and says, "Look, you'll have to give him $50 to take the whatever this object or whatever this is that has been pawned. So I'll do it. Anyway, I'll have to pay. I'll do it. I'll get for you. If you want, you can come along with me. We'll go together." So at first she's, Miss Bixby gets ready to say yes, that would be exciting. Then she realizes that she can't possibly go back to the pawn shop owner and pretend that it wasn't her who had left behind the coat. So she's, "No, no, dear, you get it. I trust you. You get it, but let me know. If it's something interesting, you should call me from work and tell me. I want to see it." So he says, "Why, you seem so excited about it." She says, "Yes, why not? Why can't I be excited? It could be you said it's something expensive, and I wouldn't mind taking it if it's something expensive." So the husband says, "Okay, fine, we'll do that." And the topic is dropped. And somehow she gets through Sunday, and Monday comes on them. It's finally Monday, and when he goes to work, she reminds him, "So you'll call me from work once you collect the whatever you picked up from the pawn shop?" And he says, "Of course I will. I forgot about it actually. I'll go pick it up before I go to work." So she says, "Then I'm coming." Then she says, "I'll call you." She said, "But I'm going to come to the office anyway." He says, "Why do you have to do that? I'll call and tell you what it is." "Okay." And she has to, control her anxiety about the whole thing, and she lets her husband leave. And after a couple of hours, she gets a call, and it's her husband, and he's laughing on the phone, and he says, "You won't believe it, what I've got." So she says, tell me, what is it?" So he says, "Guess, why don't you guess?" So she says, "Is it a diamond ring?" He says, "No." "Is it a bracelet?" "No." "What could it be? Is it a bag? Is it a lovely leather bag?" "Not at all." And he laughs. She says, "No, I can't take it anymore. I'm coming to your office." So he says, "But dear, I'm busy right now. I won't be free until lunchtime." So she says, "I'll come at lunchtime then." So he agrees, "Okay, fine, come at lunchtime. At 1:30 when I'm having my sandwich." So she just about waits till lunchtime, and she rushes to his office. And when she goes in there, his assistant is Mrs. Putney is clearing up, and he says, "You can go and have your lunch. You can join me later." So she leaves the room, and Mrs. Bixby says, "Where is it? Where is it? I want to see it." So he says, "It's in the closet there. You can have a look, but first, don't open your eyes. Let me open the door for you." So her husband goes ahead of her, and she keeps her eyes closed, and he says, "Okay, now slowly you can open it. I have it in my hand." And so she slowly opens, little by little. The excitement is too much to take. And then when she opens her eyes wide, she almost falls down in shock, because what her husband's holding is nothing that looked like the mink coat. It was a scraggly bit of mink, yes, with the heads of the animals still on, with glass eyes, and it was a neck piece. It was a small neck piece. So she didn't know how to react. And her husband said, "See, this is mink. It's actual mink. Can you believe it? Somebody had pawned this, and now you lucky girl, you're the owner." She doesn't know what to say. She says yes, because she's never had mink before, but she was in a state of shock because she didn't expect this. And then he said, "Go on, put it around your neck," and he puts it around her neck. It's a mangy little bit of a neck piece, and she takes it off immediately because she doesn't know how to react. And so this is what you got? "Yes." "And it's so expensive." Her husband says, "So when you go out, make sure you leave this behind, because if not, people may charge us more, make us pay more looking at this mink neck piece of yours. Her mouth is dry. Mrs. Bixby says, yeah, okay, fine. And then he says, okay, now I think you better leave. I have some work. And did I tell you I'm going to be late tonight? So she says, yeah, you're going to be very late? She says, yes, I'll be home by maybe not 8 or even 9. So she says, okay, but disappointment was too much for her. So she said, okay, fine. And she leaves. And as she leaves, there are murderous thoughts in the head. She says, I'm going to go to that pawn shop owner right away. I'm going to kill him. I'm going to throw this at his face and ask him for my mink coat. How dare he? How could he give this instead of that? My $6,000 mink coat and this little bit of limp. I can't even think of putting it around my neck. And with these murderous thoughts, she steps out. And when she steps out, Mr. Bixby's assistant steps out. She was just going out for lunch. She says, lovely day, isn't it? She says, yes. And then she hears a rustling and she turns back. And she finds Mrs. Putney sailing away with a lovely mink coat which flows like silk, like a second skin, down to her ankles, and she hails a cab. That's the end of the story. So this is a story that never fails to amuse me. So who cheats on whom? Yes, and finally she
serves her good.
Serves her good. So all along you wonder what Mr. Bixby was up to.
Yeah, exactly. So, till the last scene, you kept the suspense.
Oh yes, this is a beautiful story, and so this is the reason why, as the narrator said, this particular story was approved by all these men who had felt that they had been fooled in their lives. So that was Mrs. Bixby and the Colonel's Coat for you by Roald Dahl.
Yeah, usually you hear all the women's side of it. I think this story, the men will love it.
Oh yes, the men loved it, is what the narrator said. So those are two different kinds of love stories for you in this month, the Valentine month. Of course, every month can be Valentine, but then this one especially.
Yeah. So hope all of you enjoyed it. So until next time, when we come back with another set of stories, it's bye-bye from Sugar
and Spice. Bye-bye. Love you.
See you all.